Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello, everyone. This is part 3 of How Not to Plan 2025. So, number 3 is don't pretend that you're not human. A giant mistake that I've seen myself and other people make in planning our year ahead is not accounting for surprises, specifically the unpleasant surprises. The reality is that we will have unexpected expenditures. We will experience periods of not being inspired to work on our creative projects. We will experience periods of slowing down, getting a little too tired maybe, or getting busy, being pulled in a direction that we didn't expect. We will have challenges and obstacles to actually spending as much time as we'd like with the people that we love, with doing the things that really matter to us. I've seen for myself a pattern of doing this with my schedule. When I look back at 2024, I realized I said yes to way too many things. I let my schedule got super packed, and I let a lot of my meetings run over time, and I never really scheduled time for daydreaming and just being in that completely right brain space where my mind and my body can recharge, which ultimately are really things that I need on a human level to be able to do the things that I do. Growing up, my dad used to remind me of Murphy's Law all the time. And basically, Murphy's Law says anything that can go wrong will go wrong. On the surface, this looks and sounds pretty pessimistic, right? And also, it often goes against a saying that we hear a lot in spiritual circles that I think a lot of people often misunderstand, which is that our thought creates our reality, right? So there's this tension between anticipating for the things that will fall apart, that have, the potential to fall apart if they don't have solid foundations, against this idea that we need to guard our thoughts so that we don't have bad things happen to us, right? However, when it comes to planning for projects, setting goals, and having aspirations, what I found through experience is that the tendency to not account for things going sideways is often more likely a reflection of denial, a reflection of not wanting to look at the areas where maybe we can use a little help, or maybe we can use a little feedback, or maybe we just need to hire another person to do it, right? Usually, lack of accounting for surprises is not really a reflection of true faith. They're rather this act of us burying our heads under the sand. Considering the possibility that something unexpected will happen often requires a level of maturity. It often requires a level of self-honesty. And for many people, confronting the reality that things can go sideways is often challenging because many of us have been taught that our temporary setbacks are due to our lack of efforts, are due to our incompetence. We are taught that failures happen because we're stupid, failures happen because we're not prepared enough. And I don't think this is true. I really want to debunk this right off the bat. The reality is that our processes have their own intelligence, right? We don't always have a say over the delays, over the unexpected outcome, or the complete left turn. However, we can account for the fact that we are human. And an integral part of being human is we get bored, we get distracted, we lose interest, we need a longer break than we think we do, we get sick, and the list goes on, right? This is something we often forget. This is something we often ignore in our process of planning. In my own life, I've noticed there's often hidden shame underneath not giving myself the opportunity to really schedule ample space and time for preparations, for breaks in the midst of projects, and for pivots. And when I go deeper into investigating why it's difficult often for me to bake in these padding, right, on a time level, energetic level, sometimes even tangible support level, what I found is that there's hidden shame there. There's shame for the fact that I am not this infallible, godlike creature who can get everything done and make sure that they get done within the timeline. So if we look at the schedule that we've laid out for the coming year, or the list of the projects that we've set out to do, and it seems like it will take a miracle to get through them. If we're being really honest with ourselves and we look at that list and we're like, wow, that is very ambitious. We know that we're not accounting for our humanity. I encourage you to give yourself permission to notice this lack of spaciousness also in your day-to-day experience. This is another way that we can detect that this is happening, right? In other words, perhaps you've already set into motion a specific plan that you have, or a specific schedule that you want to execute. And as you go through the day, you can notice, do I have enough time to eat during the day? Do I have enough space to actually enjoy myself at least 50 to 60% of the time minimum when I'm working on my big goal? Do I have enough resources? Do I feel like I'm able to enlist the kind of external help that I need to not feel like I'm working so hard all the time, and to not feel like I can't ask anyone if I get stuck? If you notice that something is out of balance, are you able to move your target dates a little bit? If you're not able to see any wiggle room in your life, in your schedule, in your work, then what you've set out to do may be unrealistic. And you may want to ask yourself, why do I do this to myself? Right? Why am I subjecting myself to this completely unrealistic standard? How does my body feel about this goal that I've set for myself, this aspiration? Is there a better standard, one that is more in alignment with the balance between my mind and my body, one that's more honoring of my actual capacity that I can adopt here? And so as you reflect on your own process, and whether you give yourself plenty of space to be human in your process, you may want to identify what feels hard to you about giving yourself space. This goes beyond timing and space. It also extends to resources, right? In considering your budget, in considering the kinds of resources and the amount of resources you need in order to pull a project off, You may want to build some room for surprises, for unexpected things happening. You may want to ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario here? What is the best case scenario? Can I aim for something in the middle? And you can also integrate this by first considering your own tendencies in planning, and then to adjust the time, the space, and the resources you're allocating based on your own knowledge of your own tendencies. For example, I know for myself, my tendency is towards underestimating the amount of time that I need in order to complete things, in order to be able to get what I need to get done in a way that actually feels good to me. I also know that I tend to underestimate the amount of help that I need. I know that in order for me to request for others to help me, often I need to do a little bit of work to really feel into what kind of assistance do I need, and that takes time, right? It takes time to figure out what do I not have access to, and how can I best ask someone for their help, and who can I best ask to help me with something. And so knowing that, I will come up with the amount of time, space, and help that I think I need to accomplish my projects. And then what I do is I double or I triple that amount, right? And something that I know I've struggled with when I did this is I started to wonder, what if I don't have that time, energy, or resources, right? Once I double everything, then it looks like I'm achieving so much less. It looks like I can't squeeze my resources as intensely as before. I think this is a great question, and I think this is a great objection to work with. This is something we'll ultimately run into. Personally, I think limitations and restrictions are amazing because they really force you to prioritize. And through prioritizing, usually we end up achieving goals on a creative and even sometimes financial level that we never thought was possible before. Restrictions and limitations force us to get clear about what matters, about what is truly essential and what are not. And so I would look at either the number of projects or the scope of the projects. And then what I do is I take myself, I'd let myself take it down a notch. Maybe you discover through this process that you really only have space for one major creative project throughout the year, or that maybe you're only able to make 80% of the progress you'd like to make. Fine, right? There's something that actually can feel like a relief when we allow ourselves to do this. There may be temporary disappointment. There may be a sense of like, oh, that's so sad that I don't get to, fully take this to the extent that I want to take it. But I'd say it's better to right size our expectations now rather than deal with the consequences of being over ambitious later. And finally, what I'd like to share here is that the purpose of planning is to give us more of a peace of mind, to increase our chances of not only accomplishing what it is that we want to accomplish, but to also give ourselves more agency so that we can craft the kind of experience that we want, and we can resource our process in accomplishing those goals. And something that I know I really struggled with for a long time when it comes to planning is that planning can feel restrictive. Planning can feel oppressive. Planning can feel scary even. I have experienced a little bit of fear around how if I plan and I set a goal and then I fall short of my goal, then I'll be disappointed with myself. And this to me is, first of all, so understandable. It makes so much sense that we feel that way. And also, it's rooted in a misconception about planning, right? Because when we feel oppressed by our plans, it's often because we cling on too tightly and we attach our identity and our value to our plans, right? When actually, really, our plans are supposed to work for us, right? They're really assistance for us in our process. They're really guardrails and a lantern that we can hold on to as we move into the depths of our experience, right? As we get deeper into what it is that we truly want. Your future self will thank you for giving yourself at this point the grace and generosity of extra spaciousness in terms of time, energy, and resources to do the things that you want to do. Okay, I lied. There's one more thing that I want to share here. So, the title or the point that I'm trying to make here is to stop pretending that you're not human. And I want to explore a slightly different angle on this than what I've been speaking to. The angle that I've been speaking to so far has to do with recognizing that you are a human with needs, with capacity limits, right? With unexpected things that will happen to you in your life, and maybe even unexpected turns in how you want to walk your path. Now, there's another dimension to this, which is if you are someone who does something that is public facing, right? And to a certain extent, most of us do this, right? Whether that public means kind of the wider world, right? For example, you're listening to this podcast that I'm creating, and you're part of that wider world, right? Because we may have met, we may not have met, but to a certain extent, we also interact publicly with people, for example, at work, right? Or people in our local community. Now, something that I believe is part of modernity and also part of capitalism and rational way of thinking is this belief that our professional selves need to be separate from our human selves. And I think there's some truth to this to a certain extent. You probably don't want to tell people in your professional spheres everything about you. That's probably not the best strategy. But at the same time, too, I find that when we embrace and accept our human selves and our human sides, whether that be our preferences, right, or perhaps our quirks, our idiosyncrasies, our unique strengths and weaknesses, and the ways that maybe we're just, one individual human being that's not going to be able to appease to everyone. When we embrace that part of us and we move from that place, I've often found that we become way more able to connect with other people. And that ability to connect makes us more magnetic. And it actually ends up oftentimes maximizing our chances of being able to achieve what it is that we want to achieve. Now, I don't mean that to say that we need to kind of act out, right? Our idiosyncrasies or our preferences. We don't need to blow it out of proportion. But leaning more deeply into the reality that we are humans who are interacting, talking to, working with other humans is often one way that we kind of soften the hardness that reality can sometimes feel. We can sometimes feel like there are all these rules, I can never possibly break these rules, and I don't think that's true. The reality is most of us are hardwired to want to connect with other people, to want to accommodate other people, not in a people pleasing way, but just in a way that there is the shared humanity that we have, right? And so I think part of stopping this act, right? This pretense that we're not human also helps us build connections that are more fulfilling. We get to unmask from the societal expectations that we sometimes rigidly place on ourselves. It's really interesting because I've been thinking a lot about this. I've been thinking about how, even in my own life, I've noticed that there are places where I hold myself to a certain standard or to a certain belief that, oh, this is just how things work in society. And then someone comes along into my reality and completely turns that around. Like, I remember when I first started working, I had this idea that I needed to be really professional, that my email needs to look a certain way, that I need to adopt a certain tone, and I need to carry myself a certain way in order for people to take me seriously at work. And in this specific workplace, a few months later, this other coworker came into our team and they were completely different. They broke all those rules. They were very warm and compassionate, and they really moved from their superhuman way of being, and everybody loved them. And I remember kind of being triggered because here I am, I've created this whole persona of being a really professional person, and turns out that's not really necessary all of the times. And clearly, when you carry yourself and you really own that part of you that's very human with a lot of compassion for yourself and confidence, people respond to you too. And if people respond in a way that's negative or doesn't fully embrace you, then maybe that's a signal that these are not your people. So, yeah, I hope that gives you something to think about. And I hope that you stay human throughout 2025.